Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, it's hard to wrap one's head around amidst an already devastating conflict. Combatants on both sides of Sudan's war are accused of raping children, including babies and infants. UNICEF has logged hundreds of cases, but the true scope of the abuse may be far greater. Also in DR Congo, victims of a double bombing in Bukavu are buried in a ceremony organised by the city's new M23 rebel authorities. And spectacles, storytelling and celebration. It's carnival season, and in São Vicente in Cabo Verde, everyone wants you to know it. But first, once again, the use of rape as a weapon of war has been flagged amidst a major conflict. Investigators for the UN's Children's Agency says that hundreds of little girls and little boys, some not even a year old, over a dozen, not yet 5, have been horrifically sexually abused by armed men in Sudan's civil war. It adds a horrifying dimension to an already brutal war that's cost tens of thousands of lives since breaking out in April 2023. Both the army and the RSF paramilitary are accused of the atrocities.
2 boys raped at gunpoint while out picking fruit. A young girl forced to move from shelter to shelter, neglected after becoming pregnant by her rapist. Another girl abducted and raped by armed men for 19 days. These are just some of the harrowing testimonies from children in Sudan's brutal conflict. 221 cases of child rape have been officially reported since the start of 2024, according to a new report.
Data that we have from service providers in Sudan shows us that this is widespread. It has occurred in 9 states, just these 221 rape cases alone. This is an example of the fact that this is being used as a weapon of war in Sudan by all parties to the conflict, and no woman or child is safe.
Among the reported cases, more than 30% of the victims were boys, the rest were girls. They include 16 children under the age of 5 and 4 infants. Survivors face devastating consequences, from severe physical injuries to deep psychological trauma.
I met with girls who told me that they had attempted to commit suicide. I met with girls who had been diagnosed with depression, with anxiety, with post-traumatic stress disorder. The bottom line is that the suffering does not end when the attack ends, and women and girls and boys who survive these horrific attacks then have to live with the trauma afterwards, and they need support.
The war between the military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces RSF erupted in 2023. While UNICEF does not name the perpetrators, other UN investigations have blamed the majority of the rapes on the RSF. Sudan's humanitarian crisis remains critically underfunded, and recent cuts in US aid are expected to further reduce the support available to survivors.
Well, over 14 million people have been driven from their homes across Sudan. It's the site of the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Many of those forced away from their homes have tried to find refuge in neighbouring Chad. Our team reports from the border town of Verde.
Wood and straw shelters stretch as far as the eye can see. Around 250,000 Sudanese refugees now live in Adre, the first Chadian town beyond the border. Adre is originally home to just 40,000 people. NGOs are working to convince refugees to relocate to other towns in the region.
I have no intention of moving even a few steps from here. The most important thing to me, and what I truly wish for, is that God brings back peace to our country, Sudan, that it becomes independent, that we reclaim the country we once knew. So to move even further away from Sudan, I don't even think about it.
The town of Verde has a long tradition of welcoming Sudanese refugees who cross the border whenever armed conflicts erupt in their country. Zara Umar Ali owns a farm and a small business. She's witnessed every crisis in the neighboring nation. While tensions do exist between Chadians and Sudanese, she's managed to make the best of the situation.
Their arrival hasn't had too many negative effects. In some ways, we benefit from their presence. With them here, we can sell more and earn extra money.
The FAO helped her get her farm off the ground. But with more Sudanese refugees arriving in Chad daily, humanitarian groups are stretched thin and now struggle to allocate aid fairly.
The local people were already struggling, and with more refugees arriving, they are even more vulnerable. The assistance we provide isn't enough anymore.
With more help needed than ever, the UN regularly calls on donors about the insufficient funding. Since the war in Sudan started in 2023, over 1 million people have crossed into Chad to escape the violence.
Meanwhile, conflict also upended lives in DR Congo. On Tuesday, some of the victims of last Thursday's bombing of an M23 rebel rally in the capital of South Kivu were buried at a ceremony organised by the rebel authorities a fortnight after they seized the city. It's still not clear who targeted the gathering in Bukavu. A local governor says that 17 people were killed when blasts went off at a public meeting organised by a coalition of militia backing the M23. In late January, the first city to fall to the rebels' offensive was Goma, where thousands of people had earlier fled, trying to escape the insurgents' advance throughout the east of the country. Now that Goma's firmly under M23 control, many are returning to the remnants of the towns that they left behind.
The Banyene family recently had to flee their home in Sake, where fighting raged between the Congolese army and the M23. They've now been asked to return by the Rwanda-backed insurgents, only to find their house in ruins.
The wall here has been destroyed, so we had to put up this tarp to protect us from the weather.
For now, this family of farmers hasn't returned to work in the fields. They fear explosive devices may have been left behind, but also potential attacks by pro-Kinshasa militias, which they say are hiding in the surrounding hills.
If a woman goes to the fields to collect firewood, when she gets there, she can get raped.
All around Lake Kivu, thousands of displaced Congolese families have begun to return home in recent weeks. And while the violence has died down, many found their belongings had been looted and are now struggling to put food on the table.
We no longer hear gunshots, but the suffering continues and there is hunger. When we returned to our village, everything was gone.
In Minova, which is now under the M23's control, life is slowly getting back to normal. The city's outdoor market has reopened, yet few residents can afford to make a purchase, and stalls now close before nightfall.
The market used to close at 7 or even 8 p.m., but now we close around 5 p.m. because we're afraid. We are still scared of the new authorities.
According to the UN, at least 10% of the people displaced by fighting in the DRC returned to find their homes already occupied by strangers.
Well, on Tuesday, Berlin became the latest government to announce the suspension of financial aid to Rwanda over its connections to DR Congo's conflict. The UK also brought in restrictive measures over Kigali's ties to the M23. Kigali has hit back, reminding Britain that it owes over £50 million to Rwanda over a cancelled asylum agreement made with the former Conservative government. The UK on Tuesday has since sent out a statement saying no deal. Juliette Montelly tells us more.
Kigali is formally demanding a payment of £50 million from the British government. Sent on Monday, the notice adds another layer of strain to the already troubled relationship between the two countries. Rwandan government spokeswoman Yolande Makolo explained on X that London is legally obliged to this payment under the very controversial Migration and Economic Development Partnership. The project, launched in 2022 by then Prime Minister Boris Johnson and dropped last summer by the newly elected Labour government, aimed to send illegal migrants to Rwanda. The agreement did contain a withdrawing clause that London could have triggered at any time, according to the UK's National Audit Office. However, the Rwandan government, which has already received £220 million under the original agreement, argues that London never officially ended the deal. Makolo further justified Kigali's demand by accusing the UK of undermining, I quote, trust and good faith between the two countries. This comes after Britain announced last week that it was suspending most of its financial aid to Rwanda, citing its alleged support for the M23 group operating in DRC.
And finally, Fat Tuesday, Mardi Gras, Pancake Day, whatever you call it, and I'm very much a pancake girl, it is carnival season, which offers a welcome chance for joy, celebration, community, and extravaganza. In Cape Verde, the carnivals reflect the archipelago's love of music, dance, storytelling, and history. And our team managed to get in on the fun, sent us this report from Mindelo on the island of São Vicente.
In Mindelo, the traditional percussive batucadas soundtrack festivities. Performers display strength to the crowd, inspired by the Mandinga warriors from West Africa. It's a celebration that marks the beginning of the carnival in Cape Verde, a period of joy and celebration in the West African island nation.
I love carnival. All your worries, all your stress, they go away with the parade. It's euphoric.
We're so happy. Every day there are amazing parades.
It's all about letting go. Everything's great. The sea, the people are super nice.
Away from the crowds, carnival performers add the final touches to their floats before Mardi Gras. Inspired by the Rio Carnival, the Grand Parade is the biggest moment, where 5 samba schools from the island are competing in what is the highlight of the show. For months, the group Cruzeiros do Norte have been working in complete secrecy on their routine, themed around the Atlantic.
It's the blending of European and African cultures that created Cape Verdean culture, our culture, which we want to export today.
On Wednesday, the group will be, among others, vying for the award for Best Troupe, one of the many moments of celebration at the carnival.
I don't know about you, but I needed that. Thanks, though, for joining us. That is the end of Eye on Africa. Join us again if you can. Till then, take care.